You are not the only one seeing videos like this from inside Iran for perhaps the first time. Demonstrators being shot at and taking cover in the city of Mashhad over 2 weeks ago. This during a 48-hour period that will go down in the history books as one of the bloodiest clampdowns on street protests in modern times. An information blackout has meant many Iranians are seeing some of this imagery a long time after the rest of the world. So understanding and trauma delayed. The human rights group Harana has verified 6,000 killings so far, but it's still investigating the circumstances around 17,000 others. Saper Shokri, aka DJ Sepizo, was 25. This is one of his mixes. He joined the demonstrations in Tehran on Thursday, the 8th of January. He was one of thousands shot dead. We spoke to a relative of his who lives in Europe today on a condition of anonymity.
دوست داشت همیشه آدما دور هم جمع باشن، دوست داشت که خانواده‌اش همیشه کنارش باشن و فامیلش رو دور هم جمع کنه. به واسطه اینکه تو کار موسیقی بود، دیجی بود، دوست داشت همیشه آدما توی شادی باشن.
The day after he was killed, Saper's father went to the morgue in Karazak near Tehran. The facility was full, so corpses laid out on the pavements. He joined hundreds of other families there and tried to find his son's body.
سپر من کجایی بابا؟ سپر بابا کجایی بابا؟ جنایت جمهوری اسلامی سپر بابا کجایی؟
This footage got out and went viral, so much so that the regime had to respond. So, over the weekend, this report appeared on Iranian state TV. The reporter interviews the father of a young man called Saper. He says his son was killed by, quote, terrorists during the protests. Then the report says that this viral video has been doctored and that the voice on it is not Saper's father. And they're right in one way, because this is a different Saper, Saper Ibrahimi, not Saper Shokri, the DJ. And this is his father's voice, according to the relative we spoke to.
صدای پدر سپهر و سناریوی همیشگی و فیک این سیستم هم دیدیم که رفتن به یه نفر دیگه مصاحبه کردن.
اونجا هم جنازه هست؟ بمیرم الهی.
This isn't only about the classic cover-up of a massacre. Remember, Donald Trump originally said he'd intervene militarily if protesters were killed en masse. They were in the end, but Tehran didn't want Washington to think that was true.
Well, as a fuller picture begins to emerge of violence in Iran, the maneuvers of the US military suggest we may be entering a new phase in the coming days. It's the movement of this aircraft carrier, the USS Abraham Lincoln, that has many believing that a US strike at the heart of the Iranian regime is only a matter of time. The US military has confirmed that the Abraham Lincoln has left its previous position in the South China Sea and is now in the Indian Ocean near Iran. Its current movement allows these jets, the F-18 Super Hornet and the F-35s, to be deployed for potential strikes, as well as the EA-18 Growler, which can be used to jam electronic devices. It's believed that the aircraft carrier and supporting ships are already within striking distance of Iran. They're not yet at their final destination. And President Trump has labeled the movement of ships to the region an armada. Well, joining me now is Vali Nasser, former US government advisor and professor of international affairs and Middle East studies from Washington, D.C. Vali Nasser, it's good to have you back on the program. Do you think that Donald Trump is getting ready to do a Venezuela, to do a strike?
Well, all the indications are that the U.S. is getting very ready to attack Iran, and President Trump has used the word putting together an armada and saying he hopes that he doesn't have to use it, but might use it. So there's a lot of saber rattling going on, but I think Venezuela would be very difficult in Iran. Just decapitating the regime would be difficult, and carrying out a strike that would have the result like Venezuela had would be very difficult to fathom in Iran.
And is the reason why the Israelis told him not to intervene 2 weeks ago, and why he actually then didn't intervene despite the warnings, that none of the assets that we're seeing now were in place at the time? It would have been far too dangerous for other countries in the region.
That was one reason. Israel thought that if the armada was in place and Iran tried to hit Israel, the armada could intercept Iran's missiles, and therefore would serve as the first line of defense for Israel. But there were also other voices. Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince also spoke with President Trump, and his argument was that essentially once you start a war, you don't know how it's going to unfold, and that the danger of either chaos in Iran or Iranian retaliation was quite high for the region. So their estimation of how this war might unfold was very different from that of Israel, and that I think was also persuasive to President Trump last week. We'll see if he still holds on to that idea.
Is this gunship diplomacy of the modern era without the diplomacy, as it were?
Well, there is sort of back channels, I think, ongoing. But the problem is that President Trump is asking for Iranian surrender of all of its assets, nuclear, missiles, regional, as well as change in the regime. And the Iranian government is not ready to surrender, and it doesn't think that it should do so, and is preparing itself to fight back. And that fight back part is really the question mark over what a strike on Iran might mean. In other words, the United States can start a war, but it cannot quite decide how this war would unfold, right, or what the day after in Iran might look like.
And given the brutality of the government's response to the anti-regime protests, can one expect its response to, Qatar or Saudi Arabia, allies of America in the region, Israel, of course, as well, to be much more severe this time than last June?
Yes, one of the indications that came out of this brutal repression in Iran of the crackdown was that the regime's security forces are now highly disciplined and highly engaged in a fight to the finish. And therefore, I think they are putting all options on the table as well. As they could hit U.S. troops, they could hit U.S. allies in the region in a manner that they didn't do during the 12-day war that happened in June. And I think that's a question mark. Is President Trump really ready for starting a war that might be much more extensive than just surgical strikes against Iran?
Good question to end on. Vali Nasser, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.